about themselves that they'd like. So we have Dr. Kimball Erdman. Dr. Erdman is a professor of landscape architecture in the Fay Jones School of Architecture and Design at the University of Arkansas. Thank you so much for being here. Welcome. Joshua Youngblood. Joshua is the Instruction and Outreach Unit Head for the Special Collections Division in the University of Arkansas Libraries, where he also serves as the History and Rare Books Librarian and the Curator of the Arkansas Collection. Angie Payne. Angie is the Senior Research Assistant at the Center for Advanced Spatial Technologies at the University of Arkansas. She's a technical specialist with an emphasis in geospatial technologies, reality capture, digital model, and 3D visualization of landscapes. And I think we'll see what all those words mean today, too. Thanks, Angie. And finally, Bridget Wood. Bridget is the Archival Manager of Technology and Access at the Arkansas State Archives, where she's worked for nearly 6 years. Before there, Bridget worked as a graduate assistant at the University of Arkansas Little Rock's Center for Arkansas History and Culture. So thank you all so much. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Erin. And thank you, Kamiko, and all of the organizers for the invitation. We're honored to be here and to share our work with you all. This project, Rising Above in Arkansas, has been going on now. And it started with an emphasis on rower, but this last phase has allowed us to add materials to the project website that pertain to Jerome as well. Before I get too deep into the presentation, I want to take a minute and just step back and allow my panelists to briefly describe their role in the project and give just brief introductions in addition to what Erin just said. So, Kimball?
Yeah, so my name is Kimball. You might be wondering what a landscape architect is doing here today. So what I focus on is the history of landscape architecture, and especially cultural landscape documentation and preservation, which means I've been working on a lot of sites across the country for the past 25 years. And I want to say that of all the many sites I've been working on, and this is completely honest, I've never worked on 2 sites that have been more impactful in my own life than Jerome and Roar. And I've also shared the work that we've been doing with lots of different audiences around the country. And again, this is the most important audience, though, that we could be presenting our work to today. And it's just such a privilege for us to be here presenting our work. Now, I first got involved at Roar with the cemetery in 2011. We were asked to conduct a historic American landscape survey for the cemetery, which is a program run through the National Park Service. And I asked CAST if they would help me in that process and my students. And they laser scanned the cemetery, and we were able to produce a report and some very accurate drawings. If you have not seen that report or drawings of the cemetery, you can find it in a couple of locations. One is simply at the Library of Congress, and just type in Roar in Hals, H-A-L-S, and you have access to those drawings and that report about the cemetery. From there, that kind of kicked things off, and I've been working with CAST ever since 2011 on a number of projects that have all been focused on this website that you'll see unveiled, well, partially re-unveiled, anyway, today. I will also mention that we also did house documentation, just a report this time for Jerome. It's also available through the Library of Congress, and those reports, by the way, are also available in our own archive on the Rising Above website we'll be showing you today.
Hello again. My name is Joshua Youngblood, and thank you for that generous introduction. And I'll talk a little bit more about my role, and I'm going to touch on this when I present in just a second, too. But I want to echo my fellow panelists in saying it's just such an incredible honor to be here. Thank you so much for allowing us to share this space with you, to share these stories with you, and to describe the really interesting and fascinating work we've been able to do over so many years, which is made possible because of the work of so many others before us and all the work at preserving memory and celebrating and preserving legacy and exploring these stories as they go into the future. And this digital project we've been involved with is just a small part of that, although it is a pretty large website, which we'll talk about in a bit. So as the introduction said, I'm a librarian and an archivist. I'm not a digital specialist at all. I don't create the fancy stuff you're going to see, but I do help students. And so I'm a faculty member at the University of Arkansas. I work with a lot of students. I'm a history librarian. And so it's really my job there to make sure that students achieve learning, have new experiences, encounter important stories and resources. And I have several roles. I'm also the curator of the Arkansas collection. Part of that means I've been able to work with Kimball and his students over the years and bring students in, help them get to resources we have, and also bring the house studies in when they're published to make sure they're part of a permanent collection. I'm in special collections at the University of Arkansas Libraries. We've been around since 1967. I'll talk a little bit more about our collections that we have that relate to Japanese American concentration camps and internment. And it's substantial. It's a substantial amount of material. We try to collect everything published that touches on this subject. We also have been collecting archives for that entire time since 1967, and actually a few archives before we even became a real special collections and archives. And so my role at the University of Arkansas is to help students and other researchers encounter that. So whether it's Kimball students or it's people out in the community or it's seeking opportunities as they come along, like being asked to join a digital project. And part of that is working with graduate students, and I'll talk a little bit about that as well. But using whatever resources we have to bring to light the resources and the archives that are in our collection, but also connecting it around the state. So again, it's an honor to be here. And as your librarian and archivist, I'll be talking about some much more boring stuff in a little bit about how you describe archives. But it's fun to me, and it's such a privilege to be able to talk about these historical resources and how we make them more visible and usable.
I'm Bridget Wood. I'm from the Arkansas State Archives. I'm the the archival manager for technology and access there. I started as a digital archivist, and I still continue many of my digital roles that include metadata and scanning and working with contract workers there at the Arkansas State Archives. I began with this project, this latest cycle, this most recent phase. And I'll tell y'all a little bit more about my work with that when I get up to speak.
Thank you, Bridget. Again, my name's Angie. I'm with the Center for Advanced Spatial Technologies. Just say CAST, that's easier to remember, at the University of Arkansas. My background is in anthropology and technology, and so as a result, we like to use technology as a means to elevate and amplify stories in history. So that's kind of been our role in this project. This project really started with recognition of the fact that there was a wealth of materials related to both Rower and Jerome available in numerous Arkansas institutions across the state. And a lot of that material before this project was unavailable digitally. So that was one of our main focuses at the very beginning, was to facilitate the digitization of all of this material and to put it together into a single online interface to facilitate access to the collections. We also recognize that the story of Rower and Jerome is a unique story, one that we feel is even unique from the westernmost camps. And so we wanted to tell that story as well. The website that we have developed as part of this work, we like to think of it as a digital complement to the World War II Internment Museum in Magee. They just celebrated their 10-year anniversary yesterday. Yes, that's awesome. But it's yes, it's so great. It's so great to finally have a dedicated place on the ground near these camps to interpret that history. So that was really a nice milestone. It's also a complement to the interpretive signage that has been updated recently at Rower. So this next slide is admittedly pretty boring, but logistics are important, right? This work would not be possible without the support from the Japanese American Confinement Sites Program. They have funded this project in its entirety, and they have funded it in 3 phases. It started in 2013, and the initial efforts were focused on rower. In fact, to go to the website week, this would read rower reconstructed. It's just been in this last phase that we've been able to add materials to the site to Jerome. The project partners that I have listed there on the right-hand side were instrumental in all of this work. The first 6 bullets are the archival organizations that have digitized and uploaded materials to the Rising Above archive. We have roughly 25 items in our archive now to date. So they have been instrumental in this work. The UA Department of Landscape Architecture, Kimball Erdman, he's kind of become my PIC, if you will, my partner in crime on this project. We've been in it since the beginning, as he said, and his work, his countless hours of research and leading his students in the research to provide the materials that are on the site for the maps, the timeline, the 3D reconstruction has been just vital to this work. And then I've already told you about CAST's role as well. So I don't want to spend too long on introductions. I want to get to the website because that's one of the main things that we're here to talk about. And so this latest version has been unveiled just this week. And so this is something that we are actively working on. So it's not 100% done, but I'm willing to venture that it's probably 90% of the way there. This is what you see when you come to the home page. There are, well, it looks like there's 4. There's actually 5 principal components associated with the site. One thing that we have added on this page that we felt was missing in the first versions was a quick introduction about the camps. So we provided just a very brief history. We have located some fairly rare color Jerome, which we think is fairly unique that we've been able to add to the site. I'm going to pause that. And then to accompany this story, we also have a series of images, all of which are taken from the Rising Above archive to facilitate the telling of this story. Again, very briefly in a couple of paragraphs on the home page. You scroll on down and we've got some more information about the website. This is partly because there's really a lot of information here and getting to it might be a bit of a challenge. And so for people who read websites, there's not very many of us, I admit, but for those of you guys that are readers, if you scroll on down, it kind of gives just a brief rundown of the 5 main components of the site and how to use them and kind of a suggested order to visit things in. So that was just some revamping that's been done to the home page. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn it over to Kimball, who is going to tell you more about the timeline and the maps components of the site. And then from there, we'll turn it over to Bridget and Joshua, who will tell us more about the archive. It'll circle back to me. I'll talk briefly about the connections graph, the 3D reconstruction, and then also offer some concluding remarks. All of that will take about an hour, but we'll do the best to be brief in areas where we can, because we don't want to keep anyone from food. So, Kimball.
Notice how Angie looked at me when she said be brief. So I will try. Again, what we're trying to do today is just introduce you to the website, and we need all of you to go and visit it and explore it. And there's so much material here. The more you look, the more you can find. We tried to make the website read on a variety of speeds and levels, so you can get an overview if you just want to skim through it. But if you really want to dive in deeply, there's so much material here for you to explore. So again, I'm going to phrase my remarks, and actually all of us are going to phrase our remarks in terms of all the things that have changed. So we are assuming that some of you, at least, have already visited the website. So we're going to make our comments based on around the things that we've altered. But if you're new to the website, that's fine too. You'll get a good introduction to it at least. So I want to start with a timeline, which is admittedly not really the focus of our website. It's an important part, of course, but the other areas of the website are much more robust and deep. In fact, one of the things that we've changed in this timeline is we've actually shrunk it down. The purpose of the website is to provide a contextual history to internment, both the period before, what we're calling the prelude now, when we've created sections here. Then we have the incarceration period itself during World War II, and then we have this third chapter, the postlude that follows. Now, the old timeline had over 100 stops. It only focused on Ruhr, and the new timeline has around 40 or so, so a lot fewer stops. We haven't reduced the amount of material on the website. What we've done is we've taken this middle section, the incarceration period, had an awful lot of information in here, and our fear was that on the previous website that information was getting lost. And so what we did is we moved the information from that portion of the timeline into the map section that I'll explain to you in a moment. So the content is still there. We've just moved it where we think it'll be more accessible. So again, the main purpose of the timeline is to provide this contextual history. A couple of just kind of house cleaning, keeping things. You'll notice on the left, we have a title of a particular stop that we're at, a date, and a very brief text description. Underneath that, most stops have a couple of primary source documents, an image, a newspaper article, etc., that help illustrate that particular event. Okay, if you click on one of these documents, we've added a caption now to these documents. That's another change, and then of course the citation for where this material can be found. Now the prelude, if we go to the prelude section here, this is a way to navigate through the timeline. We can jump to different sections through these buttons. We can also scroll through here. We can also zoom in and out on the timeline, as you can see. And what I recommend, if you want to see the full story of the timeline, simply click through each event so nothing is missed. The types of things the types of stops that we're telling in the timeline are international, national, and even local. So we introduced, for example, the formations of the towns of Jerome and Ruhr in the early 20th century as part of this timeline. We begin with America forcing open Japan to trade under Commodore Perry, and we go on from there to talk about immigration into, of course, with the major restoration and the immigration that begins after that period into Hawaii and into the United States, and then anti-immigration policies from the late 19th and early 20th century that eventually are going to lead to, of course, the kind of the end of this prelude, which would be the bombing of Pearl Harbor. That, of course, leads then us to incarceration with the events of, oops, one more here, the acts that are going to order evacuation, as you're all familiar with. This period of incarceration will then hit some of the highlights, both in the camps and also nationally in terms of those major events and internationally as well. And finally, we'll conclude with postlude, which looks at the closing of the camps, the removal of camp materials, and eventually the remembrances of these camps and some of the major events that have happened, such as the formation of the Mickey Museum that conclude this timeline. Moving on to math.
You did good.
I did good.
Yeah.
Just 1 minute over. I did okay. So the maps is really a major portion of this website. In fact, the maps is where you can go to get the most robust story. And what I'll tell you about the maps is, again, the more you explore, the more you'll find. So there's an awful lot of material here. And we don't want to overwhelm you, but again, you can go through and you can skim things. But if you really want to dig deeply in here, there's so much material to explore. So again, let me introduce you to the basic structure so that you won't get too lost when you dive in. The first thing you'll notice is that there's a large map window. Okay, so this is kind of the main content area. There's also a very important column on the left here. This column contains 6 headings, or I like to think of them as chapters, and they are these dark areas here. And those 6 chapters tell this story, beginning with forced relocation, building the camps, striving for normalcy, creating community, diaspora and return, and erasure and remembrance. Now, what do those chapters mean? If you click on one of the chapters, okay, the map will change, but you'll also see some text. As we scroll through, we can get this kind of overview story of what's happening in this particular chapter of the map. Now, this is kind of again, an introduction to this chapter. And what you see in the map is all the material for that particular chapter is turned on at this moment. But there's also sections within this chapter. And when we click on one of these sections, there's additional text that talks about that particular event, in this case, evacuation. The map changes to show the events that are associated with that particular story. The other thing that we should say, so we have evacuation, the assembly centers, the journey, and arrival to Roar and Jerome. So for example, if I click now on these routes leading from the assembly centers to the camps, we pop open another column on the right. The column on the right is going to be for features that we click on the map. And just about every feature is clickable. And notice as I change and click on different map items, the content here changes. And again, there's more explanatory text and there are more primary source documents. Most of these documents, by the way, are coming from our archive that will be talked about in a moment. Now, in addition, if I click on one of these images or documents, I get more information. It pops up a larger window, we have a caption, we have source information, and I will also say that we have, in addition to images, if this works, and I better pause here, but we do have video, audio, etc., again, from our archive that are illustrating and talking about these different events. So I encourage you to explore as much as possible. Now, I'm going to the next chapter, chapter 2, to illustrate another feature within these maps. Oh, and I forgot to mention, there's also the map contents here. And you can see the map contents kind of occupies a large portion of the map window. Now, there are some tools up here to help us navigate the map. We can turn the content on and off here if we want to see more of the map. And then we can also go through and we can turn on and off different features in the map. And that allows us to kind of create the map that we want to see. The other major feature that some of these chapters have is a change camp feature. And again, this is new for those of you that are familiar with the old website. We now can toggle back and forth between, and it's not toggling.
Oh, no.
It was toggling earlier. Oh, there we go. Just wait. Be patient. We can toggle back and forth between Roar and Jerome. And as we do so, the content changes, and looks like our zoom level is a little off here. And it's not fully loading, but it might just be a matter of connection speeds. So I promise it does work a little bit better. Oh, and I forgot to mention.
You might try the striving for normalcy map. It's a little less complex.
A little less buggy?
Well, no, it should be working. It could be, connection.
Okay. So the other thing I forgot to mention, Angie's a wizard at putting these together. My students and I were responsible for the historical research and writing the narratives, kind of putting together the story. Angie and her team did all the work in terms of all the cool buttons and tools and mapping and things. So we have to credit her, but it also can be a little bit overwhelming. So she has promised me that there's an instruction page coming. So when you first go to the maps, there will be a set of instructions on how to use them. So everything I'm telling you now, don't worry, it'll be there. Not sure quite how soon, but it'll be there soon, and it'll kind of walk you through.
Within the next couple of months, we hope.
There we go. Okay. Other things I want to say. I could explain the chapters. Well, whenever I have time left, I will dive in as much as I can. But I would just encourage you to go and read through the chapters and see what they're about. What does striving for normalcy mean? Well, you might get some clues from the headings, but basically in this chapter, we're talking about the efforts made by the incarcerees in particular, but also by the WRA, camp employees, et cetera, and trying to make at least some semblance of normal life within the camp. And now there's various motivations for doing that, okay? But, and that's all explained here in the text. But let's go to employment opportunities, for example. And if we go to employment opportunities, again, we can toggle back and forth between the two different camps, but we can look at some of the different ways in which incarcerees were put to work, and some of the tasks that they were doing in terms of agriculture and healthcare and logging, clearing the land, etc. And some of the hardships that were faced in those situations. Enrichment, an awful lot of social and personal enrichment activities were created by the incarcerees themselves, but also by the WRA as a way to further education, promote culture, etc. And again, we have working. That was not working. There we go. We do
Make
have.
sure you click on the point.
Click on the point.
That should.
There we go. Like I said, she's the.
It needs some work still. Always. There's always more work to be done, right?
So as you can see, we can find more and more information as we go through. Creating community. On this particular map, we're zooming into the block level. And what that means is, and you'll notice there's a variety of scales on each of these different chapters. We start out with a national scale. We then move to a kind of a camp core schedule. This particular map, we're looking at a typical block. And when we look at the typical block, the first section of this chapter is going to look at the way in which a block was organized into different communities or neighborhoods, just by the physical structure, the location of the barracks, and the way in which, and part of this was enforced by the WRA in terms of the address systems, et cetera, and part of it was just the fact that you're neighbors and you're sharing your spaces with other people. And so this talks about these front lanes, for example, or the front yards in Narigumi, and how these were modified by families to create these. And then we have the back lanes, which again is more utilitarian. You know, this is where a lot of the clotheslines and other things were. But and the play spaces with the improvised ball courts, etc. So we, in this particular one, again, we look at the community life, but then we also have making a home, where we look more at the family level and some of the challenges that living in this, you know, in a single apartment for several years with no kitchen of your own and no bathroom of your own, of what that did to the family. And so this particular section looks at some of those modifications that were made by families living there in order to try to create a more home feel. Diaspora and return. This chapter is looking at different types of leave, including temporary leave for going places to work or to school, and where people were leaving from Jerome and Aurora and where they're heading to. And we can see that distribution across the country. And again, if we click on any of these lines, sometimes we'll have additional information. Other times we'll just have statistics. So it depends on the type of information. That if we had additional information beyond just simple statistics, we would have included it. In addition to temporary leave, we're looking at transfers. Of course, the most significant transfer events included the no-no questionnaire and transfers to Tule Lake, as well as the closure of Jerome and the relocation of Jerome incarcerees to the other camps. And then finally, we have indefinite leave and returning home. And I want to qualify returning home here in quotes, because there really was no returning home, as you know. Many incarcerees did return to their home state, perhaps, but there really was no home anymore. And it was reestablishing new homes, perhaps in the home state. But this section does look at this forced diaspora and where incarcerees went from throughout this 3-year period as they found homes in various parts of the states, as well as returning to California. And then finally, the last chapter, erasure and remembrance. And what this chapter is looking at is, again, the very abrupt removal of the camps after the end of the war and the closure of the POW camp at Jerome, to the events and to really what you see today. And you had the opportunity to go and to visit the camps yesterday. And one thing that I want to point out here is that, again, of all the sites that I've had the privilege of working on over an almost 25-year career so far, I'm hard-pressed to think of a site with more historical significance. Okay, these two sites are extremely significant in terms of their national and even international repercussions on history. At the same time, in preservation, we look at significance. The other thing we analyze is integrity. And integrity is the ability of a site to convey its historic significance. Sorry, I'm lecturing here. You can take notes if you'd like. But again, integrity is the ability of a site to convey its significance. As you have seen at Jerome and Rohr, these sites have an extremely low level of integrity, meaning there's very little left on the landscape that conveys the events that happened here historically. And as a preservationist, I'm always looking for ways, what can we do about that? What can we change? Well, in this particular situation, there's remarkable little that we can do physically on the ground to help that story be told. And that's why the museum in McGee is so important. That's why our website here is so important, is that we're preserving through documentation rather than through physical changes to the landscape. Perhaps someday that will change, but for now, this is the most that we can do. And it's, again, been an honor to do this. And I'm going to turn the time now over to Joshua to talk about the archive.
So, hello again. And I have to offer a little bit of a caveat. I'm going to try to, while my presentation part is not quite as fancy as what you were just looking at, I am going to try to get fancy and go between website and PowerPoint. Let's hope for the best. I think we should be able to do it. So I'm going to go over to PowerPoint real quick. Yeah. And I need to, yeah. Yes, all right. Okay, so again, I'm from the University of Arkansas Libraries, and I'm in special collections. I've been there since 2011 is when I came to Arkansas. And I'm an archivist by training. And I have to say that a lot of this history was completely new to me. Even though I'd been through a PhD program in history. I just didn't know this part of America's story nearly as deeply as I should have. And honestly, I didn't know it should have before I came to Arkansas and was charged with teaching history students how to do research. It was just kind of it was not just new resources and new opportunities, but just absolutely eye-opening and challenging to me. And so a lot of my work once I joined Special Collections was coming up to speed, familiarizing myself with the materials here, but also learning more deeply into these stories so that I could better help students and researchers and people that aren't on our campus understand the complexity and the depth and the importance of these stories as well. And so I want to pause for just a second and also thank CALS again for having us here. CALS is one of the contributors to this project for the archival material. A lot of the material comes from the Butler Center, comes from the University of Arkansas Little Rock. You're going to hear from a colleague from Arkansas State Archives. It's really an amazing opportunity for us to be able to bring archival records that are in our state to light, to share them, to make them accessible, but also to show those connections between them. And when you're doing deep historical research, or you're trying to tell a complex story that is based in history and lived reality and memory, and getting all of those things together to make sure that we all understand that story, it's sometimes hard to make those connections. If historians have to travel all over the country sometimes, go to all different types of archives, or if I'm working with a middle school student or a high school student, and yes, I've used this material here with middle school students and even elementary school students so that they can understand the history of their state.
when you're trying to tell them all, to have the resources connected and be able to show how this document or this photograph or this story or this oral history, these all connect together. It's a super powerful tool for understanding our history and seeing how individuals and institutions and national story and organizational change, how all these things work together. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about the archives that we've added with this last phase related to Jerome. I'm going to reference the ROAR project in some ways too. I'm going to talk specifically about special collections at the University of Arkansas, what we were able to contribute. And I'm also going to talk about my colleagues at the University of Arkansas Little Rock and the Center for Arkansas History and Culture, and some stuff that they were able to add too. So that said, and I gave you a warning earlier, I'm going to talk a little bit about the boring side of archives, which is actually really, really powerful. And you've seen examples of how powerful it is, which is how archival objects are digitized and described and then linked with data, metadata, so that you can access it. It returns the search results, but also so that you can create things like this timelines and the amazing maps and everything that are available on the website. So the archival portion of our latest iteration of the Rising Above project, we're adding to the thousands of archival objects incorporated into the ROAR project over the last several years. Angie mentioned that this project's now 10 years old. We've added almost 2,500 digitized objects. These come from at least 6 different archives, and I say at least because it's 6 different archival institutions in the state of Arkansas. When you were looking at the timeline earlier, as Angie and Kimball were going through those, you're actually seeing objects from the Densho Project, from Calisphere, from California libraries, from the National Archives. So stuff that's already available, really amazing resources already available in other institutions, we've linked them through the narrative, and then we have all of the material which ties and seeing stories. That's artwork from every public institution that has a research institution in the state of Arkansas has contributed to this at this point, if they have anything related to Japanese American confinement sites. So this is the metadata part of it. I do want to talk about how important it is for us to have shared descriptive standards. So when we started this project, we reached out to the Densho group out of Seattle, out of Washington State, as well as institutions in California who had been doing this work for years before us to properly describe materials and had accessible databases. So we actually borrowed their metadata scheme. We said, hey, can we just steal what you did? And they said, you don't have to steal it. Here it is. We want you to do it this way. And so we use their metadata scheme. So I have a couple of screenshots, and you'll see how it's the same glossary of vocabulary. If you've ever done any research on those amazing sites, it's the same glossary that they use, except now we've associated that glossary with all of our objects from here, from Arkansas institutions. And so whether you're doing keyword searching, you're going through particular topics, or any of the other really amazing search tools that we have, which I'll show in more detail, you're going to be mirroring the searching you would do other places. That also means that these objects can be crosswalked to other institutions. So we borrowed objects. I mentioned National Archives, objects from Densho, and Calisphere in California that are already incorporated into the project. If they wanted to link out to us, it's the same descriptive standards. So if you're doing searching there, doing searching here, it all links together. And so now it's interrelated, and that allows the maps that you've seen to actually work in this really functional way. And taking this evidence, these photographs and documents, the evidence of the real human experience, and making it not only accessible and visible, but linking it together with this really broad story that you can just plug into whichever way you want to. And so that allows the 2,500 objects we have to be part of this world of data, and hopefully data and objects that we're going to continue adding to for years to come. So that means that we had to transcribe it, we describe it, we'd associate the metadata, all the glossary and all the terms. We had to do all of that. And then we also associate that with institutions, individuals, and other topics. So you can dig in real deep on something, or you can just go to a particular institution. So we have this amazing filtering tool that's part of our project, and credit to Angie Payne for this innovation. As an archivist that's been doing this for a really long time, I'm in the career for 17 years. This is one of the most powerful tools I've ever had the opportunity to work with, and I'll show you why it's so powerful. Because it associates institutions as well as objects and topics together. So the filters allow you to search within subsets of results, so you can get search results and then you can go deeper. You can browse through particular collections, or you can combine collections to browse. You can look at certain topics, like you can just go right in and I'll do a test search for you, assuming I can toggle over to the website and come back successfully. And you can look at certain types of objects, which as somebody who does cultural resource management and archivist, that's really fun for me. That's really exciting. So maybe I don't want to look at the same boring government documents I always look at. I can go look at artwork instead, or I can go pull just autobiographies or memoirs or oral histories and just look at those. And then, as I mentioned earlier, you can combine filters to do searching as well. So let's see, started with, there's a timeline feature I'll show you, so you can narrow your timeline. That incredibly expansive contextualized timeline that Kimball was just explaining to you, you can narrow your searches to say, wait, I just want 1943, or I just want 1961 or 1968. Or if you're familiar with the Life Interrupted project, I just want to look at stuff that was created in the 2000s, as different generations have been part of this story. So you can narrow that with your the timeline searching. You can go to topics. So what we have here is starts right at A, goes all the way through. This is that metadata I was describing. So we borrowed this topic list from Densho, shared by institutions all across the United States. So you can go, you see activism and involvement there, and then a subheading, civil rights, subheading politics, literary arts and essays down under arts and literature. So you can go through those different topics. Item types, 3D object, artwork, audio, autobiography. I'll show a little bit of that in the live site too. So I mentioned the timeline there, and then you could associate different topics there and have different fields searching together. And so before I go over to the website and show you some test searches, I did want to just take a moment and thank my graduate students. Thank all the students, and Bridget has gotten to work with people too. A lot of the work that we were able to do at University of Arkansas was because of the Japanese American Confinement Sites funding. And I want to just say that because I didn't do a lot of that work. I got to help really, really smart students. Two in particular, Dr. Anne-Marie Martin. She's a doctor now. She was working on our project for 4.5 years as she was finishing her PhD at the University of Arkansas. Now she's a history professor. She described, selected, and actually photographed, working with our digital services department as well, but it was actually in our archives photographing material, and added more than 7,000 objects from our collections. 700 objects just from our collection. Another student, Taylor Cash, who's a history master's student. He's now teaching high school, and he was our student worker and grad student for the Jerome phase. He added an additional, he digitized more than 400 objects. And so I helped them with selection, and I collaborated, I facilitated digitization, but they really deserve the work for doing the transcription and description and making sure it's in there, and then going in and QAing stuff too. QAing meaning quality control to make it right, make sure it's right. So I'm going to go to Rising Above now. And so from the website, you can see you can go up to the archive up there, or you can choose archive down the bottom. See the archives here. So again, a lot of the objects you saw on the timeline and the maps are coming from our archive, not all of them, but many of them. But if you search in here, a really amazing thing that you can do is just go right to the archive. So if you're a middle school student, or you're a college student, or a professor, or your family and your legacy is connected to these camps, you can do research right with the primary sources. So if we were to open that up, you see the objects that come up. You see all of these ways you can toggle all the way up here. So you can just work, you can browse all the way through. The archive is pulling material from Rower and Jerome together, and also from associated camps. And then because of the Life Interrupted project, actually stories from across the country get incorporated here. But just taking just a real quick look, browsing, you can see fine art, you can see paintings, you can see original photographs, all of this material. And then you see our archival institutions down at the bottom. So if I were to just do a search real quick, I'll do a search first on something that I actually research a lot, which is the cooperatives and the stores that were there. If we were just put in a search term, we could just do keyword searching right away. I put in cooperative, and you see the range of material that returns. Get things from the Hunter collection. You get stuff from the Trice, Rower Relocation Center, all of these different objects there, including photographs, all coming back just on that keyword searching. If I were to open up one of those items, you see it's fully digitized. It's 300 DPI JPEG, which you can download, completely full access. So any object you find in here, you can just pull down. And then this is all that data over on the side. So this is the stuff that as an archivist, I'm just so glad to have included. So not only does it tell us what it is, it also tells us how it's associated with our subject terms in the tree. And then it gives us a description here. And then it links out. So if I were to take this and then I wanted to associate with the Fujishima family, I could go directly there and pull up other material. And it also tells me which collection this comes from. And then other really important information from the technical side for how we did it. But so you see how that's hyperlinked? If we were to follow that, it pulls up other things related to the Fujishima family right there. So if I were to clear that out, just show one more search real quick. Another one that comes from a lot of the materials from special collections. I did YMCA just because I know that touches on lots of objects right there. You can see all of these things that return, official correspondence, manuscript material, clippings from newspapers, things from yearbooks, all returns right there. If I were to pull this object right here, let's say the Resettlement Bulletin, Volume 1. This is a full publication from Jerome that was included within one of our collections at the University of Arkansas. I'll talk about a little bit more in a second. And you can see all of the different material, all the different topics that are touched on in this one collection. And then, because it's fully scanned, you could go through and read the entire thing and download anything you want. Something I help students do all the time. Pull this down, take a little picture. You're halfway to a PowerPoint. That's a really great PowerPoint. So I wanted to show, I'll go back to the archive real quick and show how the combined topics. So the filters, I kind of went through the filters real quickly. We could spend a lot of time with the filters, and we don't have a lot of time. I do want to just show one thing, that if you drop down the collections right there, you see all of our partner institutions. And so thank you again. And there are collections from within institutions. Like there are 7 different collections here from the University of Arkansas libraries, including that one right there, right here. There's also Life Interrupted and the other materials. I don't want to search on that, but I do want to show an associated search real quick. So if I were to do leaving camp as a topic, so it should pop up. Oh, that's by item type, sorry. I'm going to go to topic and do, you see it's super smart and it's already telling me what I'm probably searching. So I'll do leaving camp as a topic, and then I'll combine that with the type of material, and I'll do an official document. And it pulls back within this subset, which might not be as exciting for you all, but for me, as somebody who helps people write books all the time, it's like, get right to the thing right away. And then again, you can see which collections these are all from. So I will now go back up here.
Probably better pass it to Bridget soon.
Okay. Yes. All right. So real fast, gave credit to my graduate students. These are the collections that we added, things related to the Jerome Relocation Center, which is a government records collection that's at the University of Arkansas. Materials from the Robert Leffler papers. He became chair of the law school, important lawyer in the history of Arkansas. We have his legal collection, but we're able to connect that now. Other legal correspondence, and then stuff from material from Virginia Kimball, which I did want to mention very quickly. That's this last collection here. All those links go to our finding aids. A brief note on reparative description. One of the things we're doing at the University of Arkansas is engaging in this archival concept, reparative description. That is to go back and rewrite our older finding aids that had possibly offensive or incomplete description in them, finding aids from the 1960s and 1970s to description for archives, and replacing words like evacuee with incarcerate, and then putting disclaimers to say that why we're doing that work. This is stuff that's happening for us at the local level. Other archives are doing it, but it is informing how the materials show up in other places. Yes, absolutely. And just to acknowledge that, and thank you for thanking me, I can take very little credit for this, except that we're doing it. This is from Yale, who is one of the pioneers in this work. California institutions are also doing this. Among professional archivists, this is a target of ours right now. We're really trying to get this done, but it's a long process and will take years to fully repair that description. And of course, as culture and society evolves, we'll have to continue doing that. So I mentioned the types of materials we have from our collections. And I did want to just mention that one of the really exciting things we were able to add was student essays from the Virginia Tidball collection. So she was a teacher at Denson High School. She worked with the incarcerated students. 178 different student essays of their autobiographies are now fully digitized with all of the names, all of the family, and it tells oftentimes where they came from, what their family experience was, and what camp life was like for them. And now these are fully accessible. Used to be kind of hidden in our collections, and now anyone around the world can use them to do research.
They also have full transcriptions.
Yeah, oh yes, and they are fully transcribed as well. So you have the handwriting version there, and then you can go through and full text searchable because of the transcriptions and all the description with metadata I mentioned earlier. And just, again, official documentation, we've added that material too, but I'll turn it over to Bridget. So, thank you. Life Interrupted. I was supposed to talk about Life Interrupted very quickly. Life Interrupted, all of the work from 2004, all of the material that was collected by the University of Arkansas at Little Rock, more than 400 objects have been digitized and are now part of the project as well. That's oral histories, that is the questionnaires that they sent out, that is fine art. It's an incredible aspect of what's there. So now if you were to just go through the UALR scoping, our filters, you would see the 412 photographs, art pieces, and documentation all there connecting through. The Fujishima family that I highlighted earlier, that's available now because of UALR and the incredible work they started doing in 2004, and how the Center for Arkansas History and Culture has allowed that to now be more accessible. So now you can always search the Life Interrupt materials that have been collected. So, all right, now.
Okay, so I should be able to breeze through this pretty quickly. Joshua did an excellent job on covering a lot of the search features, so he's making my job easy and quicker. All right, so my name is Bridget Wood, and my work on the Rising Above site began with this latest cycle, though my organization, the Arkansas State Archives, has contributed in 2 prior cycles. My role was selecting and helping ASA's contract worker, Acadia Rower, find and digitize material outlined by my predecessor. I also reviewed what Acadia uploaded to the Rising Above site. The topic of Japanese American internment in Arkansas wasn't entirely new to me. I had assisted with research on the subject beginning in a graduate class at the UA Little Rock under Johanna Miller Lewis. The class included a site visit to the World War II Japanese American Internment Museum in McGee, Arkansas, and to the internment site and cemetery. And that was on a rainy and muddy day, so we got to use 4-wheel drive to get out of there. Though we didn't drive too much off trail or anything. While a graduate assistant at the Center for Arkansas History and Culture, I photographed 3D art objects pertaining to the internment camps. And in recent years, while at ASA, staff have updated our website, the Arkansas Digital Archives, to include improved subject tagging for our Japanese American internment in Arkansas online collection. That collection includes some images from the early phases of this project. Today, I'll be demonstrating basic search functions of the Arkansas State Archives and World War II Museum contributions to the Rising Above site, and I'll touch upon a few items that I find interesting. To get to the Archives section of the site, click Archive Plus, located at the top navigation and towards the middle of the page. That comes up with around 2,500 results. These are the Arkansas State Archives collections to the site, and I would have gone into those a little bit more, but I'll skip on through those. The first item on this page is a young Joseph Boone Hunter. Let me go back, I'm jumping ahead too far. He is the namesake of the Joseph Boone Hunter collection. He was a missionary and director of human services at Rower. His religious work took him to Tokyo in the 1920s, and he moved back to Arkansas later to become a founding minister of the Pulaski Heights Christian Church. This is an item from his collection. It's a 42-page scrapbook. Scanned as spreads, that comes to about 29 pages. If you click the View Transcription button on the side, that will pull up the English transcriptions from the book, and you can control search through that to help you find keywords. We also have our general photograph file on the site, the Jerome and Rower related material. Here's an example of filtering by camp. And that comes up with 85 results. Some neat images in there. And I'll move on to the World War II Japanese American Internment Museum contributions. This shows their website and the facility there in McGee. These are the collections that they contributed to the site. So if you search that, you'll get all of their results, about 341 items. I'll point out a couple items from the Brad Shirakawa collection. If you move a few pages into that, you'll come up with the first item that I'll highlight. It's the Japanese Americans in Fresno County. This item is neat as it demonstrates life before, after, and during incarceration here in Arkansas, and then back in California again. And then the final item I'll highlight is Go for Broke, about the 442nd Combat Team. If you click on the topic over on the side, it's indicated in red. You'll come up with more results for that topic. And then here is their contact information if you have any more questions about the World War II McGee Facilities collection items. And for questions for me, contact the Arkansas State Archives. And I will turn it over.
Okay, so I think we're probably close to time. And in hindsight, we should have asked for an hour and a half. And Kimiko never put us before lunch, like ever again. So I am going to do my best to kind of go through this material rather quickly. It's some interesting stuff, but shortly we're short on time. So, and I don't want to keep folks from lunch. So the connections graphs in the archive are basically, it's a window to the archive that uses the names, features that we have recorded as part of the archive. And what we tried to do here was basically show how people are connected to one another through their connection or common ties to the archive. Honestly, this is one of the areas of the site where we need some instructions, because people see these graphs and they're like, what the heck? You know, this doesn't make much sense. It's a bunch of dots and a bunch of lines. So we hope to add an instruction page like we're going to do for the maps page to facilitate the ease of access of information. What this was done for was an attempt to kind of maintain the physical connection between items in the archive. So when I was reading a series of letters exchanged between two people, I realized that when these letters are uploaded to the archive, we're going to lose that series, right? So that was part of the impetus for recording the names associated with the items. It was an attempt to kind of maintain that connection. So what you see when you open a connections graph is you see people that are indicated as a blue node. So these are all of the individuals of all of the names that we have recorded in the archive. So they're represented in blue. And then all of the other items in the archive are color-coded by object type. And so what we end up with is all of the people that are kind of clustered together in the same space in this graph are likely connected to one another through their connections to items in the archive. The larger the node, the more connections a thing has. So for objects, that means like yearbooks, reunions, items that list a lot of people, those nodes are going to be bigger. For people, that indicates how many things are connected to that person. In our archive, that points to a lot of the camp administration, whose collections it is that we're digitizing. So as you guys know, not many families stuck around here when the camps closed. In fact, they were encouraged to leave. So we do not have a great number of family collections. So our larger nodes tend to be the camp administrators whose collections it are that are part of Rising Above. I'm going to jump to an example. So this is Mr. Sam Yada. And if you select Sam, then you see a graph reach out to all the items in the archive that he is connected to. Again, people who are kind of close together in this space, connections to one another. And we can see that evidence because there's Sam's wife, Bob, and Richard, who are also close by. So in order to see the connections of individuals to one another, this isn't really the most intuitive, it's something that we're working on. You start to hover over the items on the left-hand side. So I have Richard selected, but when I start to hover over the items on the left-hand side, it highlights the item itself and all the people connected to that item. So we see that Richard has connections through these items to members in his family, of course, but also quite a few connections with Joseph Hunter as well. And so this is very, very brief, but I want to say that it's on the upper right-hand side, it's fully searchable. So you can search for names. You can also search for topics like dancing or gardening or whatever you might be interested in, and it will access those items in the archive. It's a link then. So then once I select Richard, I jump to all of the items associated with Richard in the archive. So it's a window, it's a means of access. I think that's everything. Yeah, okay. And this is like the little bit of instruction that we're gonna add. I'm gonna talk just briefly about the 3D reconstruction that we did at Rower. I'm not gonna spend much time on this at all, but we created a full 3D visualization of a typical barracks block at Rower. We decided to focus on a single barracks block rather than doing the full camp in 3D because we wanted to give it as much detail as we could, as much as our project and time allowed. So we fully reconstructed a representative block. We don't have enough historical evidence that tells us what one block looked like. So we combed and mined hundreds of thousands of photos, newspaper articles, etc., and compiled that information together to create what we call a representative block. That block was actually located at block 12, and we focused on block 12 because we know from historical maps that that block was partially wooded and partially cleared, and so that allowed us to show kind of that situation in the blocks. It's created using gaming technology and ideally is going to be used as an educational resource for younger audiences. These are some of the sources that were instrumental in this work. So the WRA construction drawings provided the building dimensions and the precise information that we have for all of the buildings that are shown in the reconstruction. But we didn't want to show camp that it looked like when it was first built. We wanted to show once it had been lived in and been modified by the incarcerees. So we used all of the historical photos that we could find to make those modifications. This is just a quick snapshot of the results. This image is admittedly pretty old, but it's meant to show kind of the semblance of what you see in the photograph on the left and what is being portrayed in the visualization. So we've included these images throughout the visualization kind of as validation for this is why the visualization looks the way it does. We think that's important. But we also use it as a springboard for additional discussion. And in this case, we're talking about the importance of vegetable gardens, flower gardens, etc. That's it. Woo!
Andy. Andy.
Yes. Please go ahead.
To access that reconstruction, you do need to download a program.
Yes. Yes. Thank you, Kimball. Yeah. So that was not something that was done by design. That was we were meant to have the visualization so it could just play in browser, but the technology changed mid-stride, so you do have to download it, and it is only available on Windows computers. So, and I do want to make just a quick correction real fast. When Joshua credited me earlier for a lot of the stuff that CAST, my organization, has done, we are a team of, well, there's probably 25 to 30 full-time staff at CAST, but 4 or 5 of our programmers and content specialists have worked on this site, particularly Chris Angel is one of those unique kinds that is an incredibly talented programmer, but he has an eye for design. And it's his eye behind this website, which has made it look as good as it does. And so I just want to credit the team of people that have been involved in this work. So where to next? We want to see curriculum developed around this site. We want to see it used in classrooms across the state and across the country. That will be the next phase of our work. That was actually something that we had planned to do in this round of funding, but unfortunately our project partner kind of backed out and they weren't able to complete that. So that is the next step for us. This is an existing framework. It's pretty robust. It's sitting there. We would love to continue to find opportunities to continue to add to these collections. And then all of us, of course, are going to continue to present this work to everyone who will listen. So I just want to end with a quick note on why the name Rising Above in Arkansas. We knew at the very beginning that while we were focused our work on Rower, that we wanted to grow the site one of these days to include material for Jerome. So we knew that we wanted the URL to be kind of more generic and not specific to Rower. And so we came up with the name Rising Above in honor of the tenacity of spirit of the incarcerees that we've seen in so many stories. And little did we know that there was a Japanese equivalent or expression that Tom actually worked with me before on how to say. I'm going to try. Nana Korobiya Okino. And that roughly means, from my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, if you fall down 7 times, you get up 8 times. If you fall down again, you rise again. And it was particularly poignant for me as I was reading this book. This quote was at the end of a Jerome remembrance book that Alden Hayashi donated. And I learned so much about how difficult it was when people returned. It wasn't just that people went home and went to their homes and the war ended, everyone celebrated, and they went back to work. It continued to be hard. And so it is in that honor, in that spirit of continuing on and persevering and rising above that we dedicate. So again, thank you for having us. Go eat lunch.
Thank you so much again. Thanks, folks. Have a great lunch. Please be back before